Well, hello there, fellow beings. Whether you identify as a human being or a spiritual being, thank you for tuning in to Anthologies of an Overthinker. I am Josh, your overthinker for today, overthinking everything so you don't have to. So you may be asking yourself, why Anthologies of an Overthinker? Or you might not be asking yourself that. Either way, I'm going to tell you. So now most people, they think of overthinking as a very negative thing, as in perhaps coming from a place of self-doubt, maybe insecurity, and maybe just lack of confidence. So you need a sense of reassurance to give you that sense of security. So hence for the overthinking. Did I do this good enough? Did I do that good enough? Is this what they meant when they asked me to do it this way? Am I doing it the right way? It's all negative types of overthinking. But to many who may not quite realize this, overthinking can be not only a habit, but a tool. A tool to prepare us for any and all facets of the world that this existence has to put in front of us. Now, I was a negative overthinker for many, many years of my life. At the time of this recording, I am 40 years old. But in my 20s, in my early 30s, my overthinking was from a place of insecurity and lack of confidence. It was nothing that I understood to be a tool. Because to me, all it did was cause paranoia, cause me to doubt myself, cause me to overthink the aspects of things that don't need to be overthinked. And in doing so, it causes you to indirectly sabotage yourself. I was a self-sabotager for many, many years. It put me in the ringer plenty of times, and I could never seem to get myself out of it. But then one day, sometime in my 30s, like a light switch, a piece of me clicked on, and things seemed to make more sense, seemed a little more clear. The blinds, a layer of the blinds was removed, so there was another filter of things to see that I hadn't seen before. It was then that overthinking started to become a tool. So you may wonder, so how can overthinking become a tool? And like I had explained this in such a way to my brother, who may be my future co-host in this show. For those Game of Thrones fans, they will may or may not remember this episode, but near the end of the season, or the series, one of the characters, Littlefinger, a very, very sly, sort of conniving character, is speaking to Sansa Stark. She's going to be the Queen of the North, about how to be ready for everything, to know every possible scenario, every possible outcome, every possible happening that could potentially be you could be faced with at any given moment. But how? How is that a thing? How could you possibly know every possible outcome at any given moment and be ready for it? I mean, that sounds like the shit of fairy tales, the shit of movies, the stuff that can only be written in the perfect script. But it's not. if you train your brain to know better. Because really, in terms of our brains, our minds, our consciousnesses, it's very easy to become overwhelmed by the hustle and bustle of everything and anything that happens in the world. All the trillions and zillions and the amount of distractions that we have in this world is countless. Countless, infinite even. And all it does is make that overthinking an even more difficult task to sabotage yourself. A good overthinker found out how to use it as a tool and is now ready for anything, almost anything, because there are those bridges that you cross where you will never know exactly what you will do in a moment, in a scenario, until you are able to physically be in that moment and know. Because all day long a person can speak on what they would do, what they wouldn't have done. They see, I would have done this and I would have done that if someone did something the wrong way. But would you have? I'm going to have to pause for a commercial break. So stick with me. I will return and we will continue this thought. All right, and we're back. This is your overthinker Josh speaking. Before the break, we were discussing the idea of your overthinking brain as a tool, and how do we turn it into a tool that is useful for us. So I had mentioned previously an interaction between two characters in the very popular show Game of Thrones. Littlefinger, real name Peter Baelish, and Sansa Stark, who becomes a Queen of the North. Now, before, Sansa Stark was a very innocent young girl, but she needed to get in touch with the ruthless side of her. And by doing so, she became acquainted with Littlefinger, who is one of the shadiest, if not the shadiest character in the Game of Thrones series. And he was essentially explaining to her to be prepared for everything. Know what every possible scenario at any possible time could possibly be and be ready for it. But how? How can we do that? Well, one main resource of being able to do that is something that we as adults lose touch with when we slip farther and farther from our childhood, and that is our imagination. Now, the imagination is something that has been typically just touted as a means for children to play make-believe, pretend that they are engaging in something that they're not, as a way to be on an adventure without being on an adventure. However, as we get older, that idea of imagination slips farther and farther away into what becomes known as essentially child's play. And the imagination becomes something that you can't have as an adult, because otherwise it's just you just being childish. Because adults don't have an imagination. Well, adults that don't have an imagination are typically the ones that struggle much harder with, problems, issues, things at hand throughout their lives that they may or may not be trying to tackle. But the imagination, as an adult, allows us to put us into any and every sort of scenario, situation, and happening that you could find yourself experiencing. The imagination isn't one of those things that is just meant to be for playtime or pretend or make believe or whatever the connotation of the imagination is. But it also allows you to visualize the things that you want in your life. Visualize the things that could happen in your life. And visualize the things that you should prepare yourself for throughout your life. And in being able to use this tool of the imagination as a means to turn your overthinking brain into your greatest ally, you just have to believe that your imagination is not child's play. Now, the imagination as used by children is exactly meant for that, child's play. But the imagination used by adults is that of one to visualize something better in the horizon, as a means to perhaps even rewire the brain into maybe even helping you along the ways of your dreams, of your wishes, what you want to do, your goals, your ability to get to those goals almost effortlessly if you put your brain to work, especially your overthinking brain. So I was never a overthinker in the means of using it as a tool to prepare me for everyday scenarios. I was always a paranoid one, thinking that, what did I do wrong? What happened? I didn't do it right. How do I do it better? What if I do this? What if this happens? What if that happens? And all that did was causing a feeling of anxiety, which is a phenomenon that many people tend to experience throughout their days, if not every day. But anxiety is a very, very real thing that can be combated with the imagination. Because anxiety is the inability, to sync yourself, and when I mean yourself, I mean your spiritual body, your energy body, the other half of you that's not human, with your human self. And now it's easy to say and hear it in words, but what does that really consist of? I mean, for me, it was understanding that you can't take this world too seriously. And that's why we need our imagination. Because this world can put us in a spot where everything can be taken so seriously that you just end up inducing yourself with anxiety and stress, and now you got to manage stress, and the whole concept of managing stress is just ridiculous. How are you going to manage it? I mean, you don't want to manage stress. You don't want stress in the first place. But if you had used your imagination, your overthinking brain, to understand how to be ready for any of those anxiety-inducing scenarios, maybe it's like for those in this world that have a hard time with large crowds. I mean, that's a very common experience, is not being able to feel comfortable in large crowds. And I'm one of them. But knowing how to ground yourself in those moments and just go with it, go with the flow, makes it that much easier. There's a quote that I had written down many years ago that had always stuck with me. And it's inspired by my Tlingit culture in reference to salmon. And salmon going up the stream to spawn. It goes a little something like this. And I haven't seen it anywhere else, so this is an original for myself. But the salmon swims upstream to spawn the next generation of salmon. The human has no reason to swim upstream, has no reason to go against the grain, and shouldn't, because you must go with the flow. Because as you go against the flow, you you thrash against it, and it's gonna get you nowhere. So go with the flow. Much like Bruce Lee had said, be water, my friend. Now, as I've been going on about overthinking and using the imagination, that's not exactly what this podcast or this monologue, you could say, since I'm speaking on my own, is about. Really, this is meant to sort of set the tone for what is the Anthologies of an Overthinker supposed to be about. Well, this episode was mostly in regards to how do we use overthinking as a tool. But on top of that, now that yours truly, your overthinker Josh, has the ability to use his overthinking as a tool, this is how I am going to use it to help others stop overthinking so much. Because hey, I can overthink for you, because I've gotten very good at it. Believe me, I can overthink a pencil, I can overthink the pencil tip, I can overthink a speck of dirt. And that is the nature of what you can expect from Anthologies of an Overthinker, where we will overthink the most complex of questions, topics, scenarios, or even the least of complex. Perhaps even the ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that we might even delve into fart jokes, turd jokes, things about, things that would make people kind of squeamish. Because that's what I enjoy, is getting people out of their comfort zone from a conversational standpoint. And what's the best way to do that? Well, why not dabble in some ridiculosity, as I like to call it? Just purposefully saying ridiculous things in order to get a reaction out of people, get someone to change their thought pattern, their brain waves, just enough to think differently, to see a different perspective. And that is what the nature of Anthologies of an Overthinker is meant to be. Where we will get down to the bottom of anything and everything that can be overthought and will be overthought. This will be an engaging podcast where you, the listener, can give us topics of anything at all to overthink. Well, maybe not anything at all, because there's got to be some sort of limitations or expectations of what we should and should not be talking about. Because let's face it, this is a lighthearted podcast, This is meant to be more of, let's have a good, engaging conversation. It's not going to strain the brain too much, but massage the brain. Massage it in such a way that it is stimulated in ways that it never was before. And proper overthinking allows for that, because your brain wants to know. Your brain wants to know everything. And if you don't want to give your brain the ability to know everything, well, then you're just being either lazy or selfish. Because if you don't want to feed that brain everything it could possibly eat, well, then that overthinking brain is never going to be a tool. It's never going to be your tool. It's going to be your enemy. Now, would you like your own brain to be your greatest enemy or your greatest ally? Because that is what this is about. I will show you how, well, maybe not show you. Who knows? Maybe there'll be some videos that are intertwined with these things as well. This is still very young in its infancy as far as what this podcast could be. I'm just doing this on my own during my breaks to get a feel for what talking in a long-term manner would be like, especially for myself. But really, in the spirit of Anthologies of an Overthinker, where an anthology is a related collection of many different topics and media that correlate to each other in a meaningful way. So in this way, whichever way the brain can overthink any and every topic. Because face it, everyone has a million thoughts in their mind going on at any given minute. But what if those thoughts could help you? What if you could tell those thoughts to work on things for you? What if when you got to those moments where you needed a problem solved, you needed something to subconsciously work on any issues or any problems that you need solved? It'd be nice to be able to just give it to your brain and let him work on it. Let it work on it. The brain, the function of the brain, can do many, many things that we don't even allow it to do. I've told my brain many times things that, I never thought would come into fruition for me. I never thought I would be able to speak in such a manner like this on my own about topics that are popping up in my head right now. This is all freeform. I have nothing written in front of me. I have nothing ahead of me. I don't have a computer screen in front of me to show me what to speak on. I'm just running my mouth. Because I have what's called a marathon mouth. It can go quite far. I mean, I've always got 2 cents and I'm always shelling it out for free. So while my 2 cents still is free, continue to listen on, because I'm going to see how far we can go along with this Anthologies of an Overthinker. Again, this is Josh, your overthinker for the day, saying that if you don't have to overthink it, don't overthink it, because I'll do it for you. Just tell me, and I'll do it for you. But, signing off, and until next time, only overthink what you have to.
This audio is made with Audio Toolkit for Windows Store, downloaded for free now.